Here we go. So, good afternoon, everyone. It's 12 o'clock, and we are going to do episode 115, boating etiquette today. And we're looking forward to hearing from our speaker, Lisa Dugan. So, Lisa, tell folks a little bit about yourself.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. My name is Lisa Dugan. I am with our Boat and Water Safety Program in the Enforcement Division at the DNR, and my title is Recreation Safety Outreach Coordinator. And what that means is that I offer people of the state safety tips so that they can do all the great things that they love to do, recreating outside and doing it safely, and making it home at the end of the day so we can keep doing those, like boating, swimming, ATV, snowmobile safety. So campaigns and communications and outreach for the state. And that brings me into what we're going to be talking about today, which is very timely. It's a great time to talk about getting on the water and maybe some of our first times getting the boat into the water. So there's a lot of new boaters around the state. Minnesota ranks continuously in the top 5 in the nation for registered boat users. So we are a big player in the national field with how many boaters we have and how many boats are on the water. So we're going to chat today about launching a boat, more so etiquette at the boat launch and etiquette on the water, and then required safety equipment. So I would like to make this more of a conversational presentation where I'm able to give some of the practical tips, and we have Benji and Craig who I would love to be able to chime in and chat with about some of the more, hands-on real life approaches of, we can talk about launching a boat and we can talk about boat etiquette, but I think the stories behind it always add some more memory, maybe make the tips stick a little bit. So I'm going to head into this. So before you even launch the boat, recreational boating has an etiquette, and that is the customary code of accepted behavior on and around the water. And boating etiquette is about safe behavior as well as what's socially accepted. So we're going to talk about some of the basics to help you navigate the boating world with ease while not creating a stir among fellow users of the water. So these tips I think are great for whether you've been a boater for a really long time or if you're newer to it. And there is definitely a boat culture that, people kind of adhere to and, like I said, socially accepted on the water. So before you get into any situations that you may not want to find yourself in, like this picture on the screen, hopefully we can help steer you away from creating any kind of situation like that where you find your truck and boat both at the ramp. And good boating etiquette before you starts even before you enter the water. So that is at the dock. Always prepare your gear before you even get into line. So prepare all the gear in the staging area or in the parking lot before getting in line to launch your boat. And boat and gear should both be ready before you launch. And don't leave your vehicle unattended in the launch area. So that might mean using the restroom before you get into line, even as you're kind of in your parking space, getting your gear ready. And then always being aware of your surroundings and potential hazards. That's always a good tip, both when you're launching and anytime you're out on the water. Shared waterways equals shared responsibility. And waterways, as we're seeing, a lot of the launches have multiple vessels that are going to be using it. So going out at the same time, paddlers, PWCs or personal watercrafts, power boats are all going to be using the boat launch. So it's important to know the area that you're going to ahead of time. So check out the space, know where the launch line is, know if there's parking spaces for trailers. And then if you're a paddler, know if there's a soft launch area and if that's available to use that instead of leaving the concrete ramps for the power boats. And of course, as always, these are just guidelines and they should never replace the learning of the rules and regulations and laws for your local body of water, or any body of water. And would always encourage people to take a boating safety course. There's a free paddle sports course that you're able to take advantage of on MNDNR boating safety. And then of course, a boating safety course is recommended for anyone, whether, again, you've been on the water for a long time and you're just refreshing some skills or refreshing any of the updated regulations and laws, or if you're new and this is kind of an all new thing, get as much education as you can, because a boater who's educated definitely is going to be safer on the water.
I was surprised we were talking in the back room, Lisa, that nobody is required, if you're over 17, correct? Nobody's required to take a boater safety thing, kind of like we do for hunter safety or UTVs, ATVs, snowmobiles.
Yeah, and I definitely think that is a little bit shocking that boating's the only recreational vehicle that doesn't require education for adults. So there is required youth certificates for for kids younger than 17, depending on their age and what type of boat they might be in. So, hopefully and again, I think it's always interesting that boating is so unlike any other, any other rec vehicle. We don't have lanes on the waterways. There's not brakes. It's not maybe as intuitive as any of the other recreational vehicles. So that boating safety course, and especially like extending it to a hands-on course through a power squadron group or the U.S. Army Corps or the U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary, does a really nice job with having hands-on courses. And you can always check with your local county sheriff's office, because they may offer hands-on boat courses as well. So there's training out there.
Awesome. I got to share one story of this. So I do a radio show on Wednesday morning. So say hi to CAN SI fans up in St. Cloud. I was talking to my buddy Bob Hughes this morning, and he was launching, I believe, on Leech Lake for one of the openers. And everybody's around. There's a bunch of boats around. Everybody's trying to get in the water real fast, and he's going out there nice and slow. His driver, the boat owner, was taking him out just kind of nice and slow, wait until they get out in the lake before they open it up. And a couple people behind them decided they wanted to get there first. And when you crack that motor open on your boat, it goes way up. You can't see anything. They almost got ran over by that boat. So being safety conscious and knowing where these people are is a huge issue, and it needs to be probably something like a safety class would address that and just point that out to people. But it was an interesting story you had this morning. So
Yeah, and that is good. Bob always offers some good advice and good tips, right? And just, I think for, new people on the water too, is, having that awareness and, having the education behind, being able to get out on the water for the first time, and maybe going out to launch for the first time at an access in the middle of the week that's not busy. So then you don't have that pressure of everyone's there, everyone's watching. And the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. So maybe the first time launching your boat isn't going to be 4th of July weekend at a busy lake. Practice launching your boat, ahead of time, so you're comfortable with it, how it handles, and you're, ultimately more confident with it, right? You want to be able to have the confidence to know what you're doing out there.
Yeah, the opening weekend or a holiday weekend is not the time to learn to back up your trailer. And one of the recommendations I have is, find a parking lot and practice backing up your boat and backing around corners. With no cars out there, you can learn to control that trailer a lot better.
Yeah, absolutely. You won't regret it, right? The more that you practice.
No.
Don't forget the drain plug. That's a good tip too.
that was mine on the radio today, was don't forget the drain plug. Everybody's done it.
Everyone's done it. Usually once, sometimes a couple more, but so then we're going to just move on to some on the water etiquette. A big one is always own your wake, and all boats create wakes. I think that's important to note that any motorboat's going to create a wake. It's not just the wake boats. It's not larger boats. Every boat creates a wake. And again, it's that being aware of what's going on around you, having the awareness to know how your wake is affecting other boaters or potentially the shoreline. If you're going past, a smaller fishing boat or somebody who's on a paddleboard or kayak, and you're rocking them where they're falling off the paddleboard, the wake's probably too big. So just being aware, look behind you, make sure that your wake isn't damaging the shorelines or rocking the boats and the docks that are along the shoreline as well. And it's, again, one of those things where it's shared responsibility, we're sharing the resource, and you don't want to ruin somebody else's time on the water. So just a recommendation of staying at least 200 feet away from shore, depending on what kind of wake your boat might throw. And then just another piece of etiquette is keeping the tunes in check. So you may love to have your music out on the water. Not everybody may enjoy it. So sound definitely is amplified over water, and it can travel quickly, and it can travel so other people who may not intend to hear it are able to hear it. So not only is it a disturbance to others, but the operator might not hear a spotter who's watching tubers or skiers behind them. So there's a little bit of that safety aspect that comes into that as well. You need to be able to hear your spotter as the operator of the boat. And pack in, pack out. This is a tip that, we hear a lot, whether you're camping, hiking in state parks, boating in the water. It seems a lot like common sense. But again, we see a lot of trash on the shorelines and in the lakes. So make sure that you're taking everything out, everything that you're taking out with you, make sure you're taking it back, and take care of that body of water that you love, and don't dispose of the trash that you have. Definitely don't throw it overboard. Make sure you find the proper spot for it once you get back on shore. Slow your roll. Know if the body of water that you're going to be boating on has a speed limit, or if there's a slow no wake restriction. It's your responsibility to know it and to respect it. You're responsible for any of the damage you cause to other people's property. You can always check beforehand. If it's a lake that you're not familiar with, check with local lake associations, or if there's a county ordinance on the lake that you're going to be on, check that beforehand. And then always, if there is high water, we just came out of an early boating season where there was high water across a lot of the state. And that just creates, a chance to be extra mindful of areas that do have high water, and to check for those slow, no wake restrictions, especially on the rivers and on the lakes as well. And then knowing the rules of the road, become familiar with waterway markers and navigation rules, which can dictate how you operate your vessel in order to prevent collision. Waterways are busy with many types of vessels navigating the same space. And as we talked about, there is no lanes like the road. And, the waterway markers may not be something that you instinctually know what red and green markers mean. There's, areas that may have rocks or shallow water with sand. So know what the water markers mean before you go out. If there's going to be a lake that you're on that does have water markers, know what they mean so that you can steer clear of them. And of course, always keep yourself and those on your boat safe. Always be prepared. If you're the captain, you need to be prepared with the safety rules for your craft, and make sure that your guests are aware of them as well. Know the state and local laws for the body of water that you're on, and set a good example as the captain by always wearing your life jacket and having enough life jackets for each person on board that fit them properly. And then, the great thing, it's kind of my boat, my rules kind of thing. You can always set a good example as the captain, especially at the start of the season. Let those that who you're taking out on the boat, what your expectations are for safety, and model those safety behaviors. You're responsible as the captain of the boat for the people that you're taking out. So, start by wearing the life jacket, be a good role model. And especially if we're looking at the next generation of boaters, set a good example for them so that they know going into boating, to always put the life jacket on. Those safety tips should carry through. And that's always by being a good example and a good role model for those. And if you're on a area of lake that has the opportunity to get fuel while you're out on the water, fuel and go. at the fuel dock, get fuel, pay for it, and then move out of the way. Again, that's just kind of being mindful that it might be busy, busy body of water. And if you're needing to go in and get additional supplies, you can always relocate your boat. And then anchoring and mooring. This is a really, this is a tip. There's not all lakes maybe have these kind of destination spots where you're going to spend the day and anchor up for the day, but enter an anchored area at a slow speed. Don't come ripping into, a bunch of boats that are tied up to each other, and that just creates a really dangerous situation. Don't create a wake that will disrupt any of the other anchored boats. And then the first boat kind of always sets the tone for, unless there's designated parking spots, or if there's a lot of the lakes will keep kind of alleys open for emergency vehicles to get through. So abide by those. And if you're the first one there, then you kind of set the tone for parking. But mimic how they tie off, know how much line you need to use and how much distance to allow between yourself and other boats. And the busier the boat, you should give yourself more space. So if you're going to have kids jumping on and off all day, give yourself enough space so that you don't have to worry about being bumped in by another boat. And then the boat wave. It's a thing. This is a fun part of boating culture. You always see people on the boats giving each other a wave. So, continue that boating culture, embrace it, enjoy it, and share it for the next generations.
I get a question I was going to ask you, Lisa.
Yeah.
I think we talked about this earlier too, about Lake Minnetonka increased the no wake zone close to shore. And I know I'm from the Red Wing area, so that went no wake zone through the city limits of Red Wing. It's always posted in the river. They have the little buoy that says no wake. Is that on the lakes too? When you go into like Lake Minnetonka, is there anything that signifies or says that, special rule in effect, no wake for 400 feet, or I don't even know what the limit is on Lake Minnetonka now, but
I think it is 400. I would have to double check on that, but it is. So since that's a pretty new regulation for specifically for Minnetonka, they may not have out the signage quite yet. I would think they're, if not, they probably would. But if it's not posted again, that's something that's, the boater's responsibility to know that before they head out, that there are those special regulations on certain lakes and, rivers too, that there's areas that have slow no wake in certain areas, and to know that before you go out. But yeah, I think it's important to be aware that those kind of regulations per lake do exist. So check out the body of water if you haven't been there before and know what it is.
yeah. It's their responsibility to know what that is. My other question was, I live close to the St. Croix River. We recreate a fair amount and fish out there. One of the little areas, it's a no wake zone right outside of Hudson there. There's still people even in the no wake zone. What qualifies as no wake? They slow down, so they're not kicking up a wake cap, but
Yeah,
they're still kicking a 1.5 roller up. And I'm like, that's wake. What are you doing? Is there a qualification for
there
how high
is.
your wake can be?
So there is a definition for no wake, and I want to find it. And if I don't find it now, I'll find it towards the end so I can say it. It's like it's the minimal speed. I think it's below 5 miles per hour, the minimal wake that your boat is making. I would like to be able to put the statute out there so that people can check back and know exactly what it is, because that is a question. And if you're coming into, you probably see this a lot, especially in the area that you're at, Benji. If you're coming into a slow no wake area and you're kind of cruising at full speed and you slow that down, you make a huge wake that's rolling into that slow no wake area. And oftentimes that can be, more trouble than slow down before you head into it even. Don't come rolling in with a big wake behind you. But I do want to look and see what that statute exactly says so that folks can reference that afterwards.
It's amazing how fast. I think it's the 94 bridge that starts the no wake zone in Hudson, and they will be doing 50 miles an hour up until they're in the shadow of that bridge before they back off of it. And yeah, there's a lot of tubers, kayakers, and everything in the bay there that definitely feel the rolls.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, definitely. You're sending in some big rollers if that's how you're coming into the slow no wake zone. All right, so next portion is going to be required equipment. And first we're going to go into required equipment for motorboats. And then after that, there'll be a portion for paddlecraft, which is a little bit different, but very important for people to know with all the paddlers that we have on the water as well. So life jacket requirements. I think this is one of the questions that I get the most is just questions, specific questions on life jackets, how many you need, what kinds you should have. Always check the label. That's kind of the number one answer is check the label. Make sure that number one, that it's US Coast Guard approved, and that you have a life jacket for each person on board. And then life jackets must be in serviceable condition, and they must be the appropriate fit for the wearer, approved for the activity, and worn in accordance to the label and the owner's manual. So always check the label on those life jackets. We'll get into a little bit more further into this, but there's requirements for youth requirements for life jackets where adults or 11-year-old kids 11 years old and older aren't required to wear life jackets. But of course, we look at the statistics and over 90% of boating fatality victims aren't wearing a life jacket. And that's such a huge number, and it's such a huge trend that we continue to see. Just like you put your seatbelt on every time you get in a car, you put a helmet on when you're going for a bike ride, put the life jacket on. It's just that one piece of equipment that's can really save your life in a bad situation. We always talk about we want people to come home at the end of the day so we can keep doing those things that we love. So kind of mentioned already that children under the age of 10 must wear a life jacket while the boat is underway. And life jackets must be readily accessible. So this is how it reads in statute is readily accessible, which that can mean, retrieved within a reasonable amount of time in an emergency. So life jackets that are in maybe their original sealed bags that are under heavy or locked objects are not going to be readily accessible. If you have them, out of their packaging and, maybe under a seat storage, that would be considered readily accessible. Of course, it would be better to have them on. There's so many great life jacket styles available now that they, it's always a bright orange life jackets that conjure up the image in people's heads, and that's just not what they look like. The inflatable life jackets are a really great option for people that they're low profile, they're easy to wear, and sometimes you forget that you have them on. So always good to invest in something that's going to be, potentially can save your life. We put so much money into all the other equipment, get a life jacket that you'll actually wear because that's going to be the best one for you. And then I think it's important to mention that PWC operators, so someone on a jet ski, and passengers must wear a life jacket. So that is regulation. If you're on a jet ski, you have to have a life jacket on, and it can't be an inflatable life jacket. So make sure again to check the label that it is appropriate for the use. And then tubers do not need to be wearing a life jacket. It's not a regulation, but they must have one in the boat, which I think doesn't make very much sense when you're thinking about it. If you're tubing or skiing on the back of the boat, it seems like that would be the first thing that you would do is put on a life jacket. If you, hit your head or something when you're out there, or, fall off and are having a hard time catching your breath, you want to have that life jacket on. So make sure that you have at least a life jacket in the boat, if not wearing one. Is there any discussion items on that from Benji or Craig at all?
Just stay afloat.
Yeah.
As kids, whenever we tubed, whenever we water skied, everybody wore some kind of life jacket or a belt or whatever we needed, whatever we had. And it was just always safety first. And I'm a little surprised that you don't have to wear one in the tube.
Yeah. And I think that goes to show that people that, if you're growing up in a family that you're on the water, again, that's leading by example. You have role models who are doing that. So it makes sense to have one on.
I love that they pass the kids have to have a life jacket on all the time, because I don't have an argument for my girls now. Like, well, I don't want to wear one. Well, you have to. It's the law. So
Yeah. And that means no boat time otherwise. So everyone wants to
Yep.
get out on the boat. And, you know, I guess, Benji, that brings up to a good question that I often get is people asking about bringing their infants actually on the boat and what kind of life jacket fits maybe a newborn. And that's a really tough question. It's more so maybe a tough answer that people don't want to hear, is that there's not really a life jacket that's going to fit a newborn under 6 months, really. That, you know, putting them in a car seat is, or in a anything that's in the boat, you don't want to be doing that. People ask if they can put their baby in a car seat and bring it on the boat without a life jacket. That's not a good idea. Life jacket sizes just don't fit those, you know, under 6 month ages, and their, you know, head to body ratio is just so off that it's that you know, try to put a life jacket on a baby and it's kind of topple. They can't, their head's too big. They topple over
Yep.
anyway.
They can't even walk yet. So
In
I
my
did
boat,
put, I was going to mention too, real quick, I did put that video on sizing life jackets for youth and stuff in the chat and a couple other links. So if anybody's looking for some links there, visit the chat section and you can click on those. So
I always tried to carry an assortment of life jackets in my boat. So if we decided to go for a boat ride when we were at the cabin and somebody brought their kids along, we had life jackets. They don't really wear them out. You know, they last forever. And the next group of kids that came along, they had a life jacket to wear. So it's pretty cheap insurance to have, and they'll last a good long time. Just don't leave them out in the sun so they get all weather checked.
Yeah, definitely. Nobody wants to get out ready to go out on the boat and then they don't have a life jacket for them. And I mean, really, when we, you know, see warnings and tickets that are given out by conservation officers, I think between this kind of next topic that we're going to talk about with the throwables and life jackets, not having enough life jackets, that's kind of the number one warning, the number one ticket is not having that required safety equipment on the boat. So it's, you know, like Craig said, it's not expensive to have a couple extra life jackets on there that fit everybody. Because if you're, you know, 5 people on the boat and 4 adults hold up adult life jackets and 1 adult holds up a kid's life jacket, that's not going to cut it. So make sure that it fits. And then of course the throwable. So, you know, that's the square cushion that you'll see a lot of the times. That's required for boats that are 16 feet or longer, except for canoes or kayaks, and that must be immediately available. So that's a little bit different than the readily accessible, like we talked about for the life jackets. So immediately available means that the throwable must be easily reached in the time of an emergency. And generally this means that it's in the open within reach of the operator and not within a container. So, you know, we'll often most see this, the captains will put it either on their chair or right beside their chair so that if there is somebody that's in the water, you know, the point of that is to be able to quickly have something to throw to somebody who is in the water. So make sure that you have those. And then all motorized watercraft, regardless of length, must be licensed through the Minnesota DNR. So make sure that you have updated registration for your boat and are displaying it as well. And then navigation lights are required between sunset and sunrise and when visibility is restricted. And a little bit more on the required equipment for motorboats, sound producing device, motorboat 16 feet to less than 26 feet must be equipped with a hand, mouth, or power operated or horn or whistle that's capable of producing a continuous sound for 2 seconds and audible for at least 1/2 mile. So we'll see, I mean, a lot of the boats that don't have horns will just have kind of the air horn in the boats, and that works great. So if you have a boat that's greater than 16 feet, just get an air horn for the boat and you'll be covered on that. And then fire extinguishers, make sure that they are U.S. Coast Guard approved and that they're marine grade, so that if it's U.S. Coast Guard approved, it'll be a marine grade fire extinguisher. and that it's fully charged and readily accessible. Again, not packed away. And think about the placement of the fire extinguisher. So, kind of when this was pointed out to me, it's one of those things that it seems obvious until you kind of, think it through. Where we see, fires happening on motorboats is going to be, near the engine compartment. And it seems like a lot of people store their fire extinguisher near the engine. So take that into consideration, where the placement of the fire extinguisher is, maybe put it further towards the front of the boat, so that if there is an incident where you need to put out a fire that's in the engine, that you're not going to be putting yourself in harm's way by trying to put that out. And next up for paddlecraft. So required equipment for paddlecraft. And it's been so great to see the number of increased sales of kayaks and canoes and stand-up paddle boards. And to me, that means that there's so many more people that are getting out in the water. It's a great introduction to boating. Less expensive, you don't need as much gear. But paddlers are still boaters, and I think that's really important to remember. If you are on a stand-up paddleboard or a kayak, you're still a boater and there's still required equipment. Some of that, and again, we see this a lot with warnings and tickets, is that paddlers will often not even have a life jacket on board with them. So if they're, again, older than 10 years old, they don't need to be wearing it, but you need to either have it strapped on the front of the on the paddleboard or in the kayak with you. Of course, the recommendation is always to wear it. There's such great life jackets that are specific for kayaking that they fit really nice when you're in the kayak. So they're not going to be, my issue was that the life jackets that were up to your ears when you sit down. So they're, fit for the kayak. So then when you are sitting down, that they fit really nicely. They're not riding up. And then the belt packs are the inflatable belt pack style life jackets are really popular for the paddle boarders, because you have to manually pull those. So just remember that if something happens where you hit your head on the way in the water, those still have to be manually pulled and they do have to be worn. But check out the inflatable belt pack style. And those you wear on you the entire time you're on the water, and that counts for your life jacket. And again, always check the label on those life jackets as well. And same as motorboats, people under the age of 10 years old must wear them the entire time while they're out there. And then non-motorized boats that are greater than 10 feet in length, this includes canoes, must be licensed. So make sure that you have a registration for those boats that are greater than 10 feet. And navigation lights for non-motorized. So a white navigation light is required between sunset and sunrise, and when visibility is restricted. And then that light should make sure that it's strong enough so that it can be seen for at least 2 miles away. So that's where that white light comes in. And they're easy to attach. They're easy to bring out. There's marine grade flashlights too that are available that you're not going to have any issue with being seen. They're going to be the white light, 360 visibility. And lights must be displayed in sufficient time to avoid collision with another watercraft. So if you are in that time during restricted visibility, make sure that you just always have that 360 light on. And if you're anchored, that 360 white light is necessary as well. And then as we head into water safety, so again, this is, I think, timely information for the time of year, and applies both to boaters and people who are swimming, going to beaches. We've had a great spring with really warm weather. So I think this information is really important, timely. We can carry this throughout the summer. So water safety tips. Wear a life jacket and make sure it properly fits and doesn't ride above your head. I'm just going to play a quick video on what it looks like to fit a child's life jacket. While the law requires children under 10 years old to wear a life jacket while boating in Minnesota, life jackets save lives. While the law requires children under 10 years old to wear a life jacket while boating in Minnesota, it's recommended anyone recreating on or near water wear one too. Here are some tips for selecting the best life jacket for you and your children. Find one that's enjoyable to wear. Then check the label for size and weight, and make sure it's U.S. Coast Guard approved. Try on the life jacket before using it in the water. Lift it by the shoulders, and if it rises past the person's chin or ears, it's too big. A life jacket that fits properly is snug but comfortable. Have children practice wearing a life jacket in a controlled environment where they can practice floating safely and staying calm. Above all else, remember this: the best life jacket is the one you actually wear. So I really like the tip in there to make sure that the child is comfortable in their life jacket. I think that's something that can be missed, that they know how to kick their legs and keep their body up when they have a life jacket on. So, take that time to introduce your child to the life jacket that they're going to be wearing so that it is comfortable. And, hopefully it makes the parent's life a little bit easier, that they're not going to be fighting you as much on wearing it. If they're going to like it, have them pick it out, have them go with you and pick it out and try them on so that, it's something that they can take ownership of and that they know that they're going to be wearing when they're out on the boat or going to the beach. And don't swim outside your ability. Adults can wear life jackets too. So, this is something that's, again, showed up in the statistics as that it's not just, children getting into trouble on beaches and lakes. Adults are swimming past their capability or not aware of drop-offs in areas in the water. So don't swim, beyond your capability. And even if you're a good swimmer, know the area that you're going to be swimming in, if there are currents, if there's drop-offs and things like that, so that you're not outside of your swimming ability. And then if you are at areas where there are lifeguards, don't rely on the lifeguard as a babysitter. So make sure that you have somebody who's watching the water in your group with no distractions, a responsible adult who's watching the people that are in the water so that you constantly have eyes on the water. Don't just rely necessarily on a lifeguard. They have a lot going on, a lot of people that they're responsible for too. And then always enter the water feet first to prevent any injury from diving headfirst into shallow water. And I think this is important too with just remembering the high water that we've had this spring too, is that there can be a lot of debris that moves. So it might be your first time to this season at a spot that you go to all the time. Know that can change. I mean, even from day to day, with any high water, any moving water, that those areas can change. So prevent that by just, always entering the water feet first, and then stay within designated swimming areas. Try to find a designated swim beach if you're going to be going out, a little bit more predictable in those kind of areas. And then learning what drowning looks like and to recognize what drowning looks like. This is something that we often talk about, that there's like the theatrics that you think of from movies that we've seen of people drowning, where they're screaming and calling for help and they're waving their arms above their head. And that's, that could not be that more opposite of what drowning actually looks like, which is quite silent, and it can happen so very quickly and within just, inches of water. So knowing what the signs of drowning looks like, that it is often silent, and it's scary to think of, but when we've seen sometimes fatalities where there's people that are standing very close to the victim, perhaps with their back turned, but just not aware of, those signs of what it looks like when a person's drowning. So their head may be tipped up and you might just kind of see their nose and mouth above the water, and they're kind of bobbing above the water, just trying to get breath. They're not going to necessarily be able to call out for help. So just knowing that, and then being able to recognize that and, call for help. You can always, if you call for 911, you can always take back the call if they're okay. Better to be safe than sorry. And then also to remember, I have this picture in here specifically to talk about the puddle jumper style life jackets. That's a question that we often see, is that if these are approved life jackets. So again, always check the label. There's some styles of this kind of life jacket that aren't, but this specific brand is U.S. Coast Guard approved. So it would be, kids would be able to wear it out in the boat. And then in the background of this picture, we have the arm floaties, which can be really dangerous to rely on those arm floaties. They can slip off really easily. They are not life jackets, so don't rely on them to save your kid. They're looking to style that's Coast Guard approved. Okay, so don't swim from a boat that's deep without wearing a life jacket. So if you're going to jump in, put on the life jacket. Again, with the statistics, we see almost every year, it seems like that there's people who jump in from the boat and never resurface. Again, that's not going to be something that's, you never plan for tragedy to happen. Just make sure that put on the life jacket before you jump in, no matter what the reason is. Your hat blows off in the boat, put the life jacket on before you jump in to get it. And then know how to rescue a drowning person without putting yourself at risk. So we don't need additional victims in the water. If you're able to throw them a towel, or you have, first get them that throwable that you have by the captain's seat, throw them that, get them something. And if they start pulling you in, know to let go of that towel or whatever it is, so that we don't have additional victims in the water. And again, call 911 in the case of an emergency. You can cancel the call if it turns out that everybody's okay. So, and we can talk more on that if Benji and Craig have any input on it, but I also want to just let people know that there's free publications that please let us know if we can mail any out to you. Different topics from ice safety to cold water, water safety for duck hunters, our boating guide, and then kids specific coloring books and comic books that are free publications that we love to send out. So if there's ever any questions, you can call our DNR Info Center and we will gladly send them out to you. And that is everything from me.
Great job. I think I was about 11 years old, and we went to fish off the back of a family member's pontoon boat. There was a big family gathering, and it had been raining. And one of my cousins, he wanted to be the first one to get the rod in the lake, and ran out on the wood decking, slipped into the water. And I worked with him for a long time trying to get him to grasp onto the pontoon, a rope. One time he grabbed my hand, about pulled me in, and I got him to hold on to one of the railings. And I ran up to the house and found his dad and said, "Your kid fell in the water." And by the time we got back down to the boat, he had sunk to the bottom of the lake. And the guys jumped in and they pulled him out, and watching someone do CPR for the first time, rescue breathing, and he coughed up the water, and he's still here today. But it was a scary thing for a 10-year-old kid to witness. And thankfully we were able to get him the help that he needed. So it can happen to anybody.
Thanks
Definitely.
for sharing that, Craig. That's, those kind of firsthand experiences are so powerful, and it was a close call for sure. And it sounds like you did the right thing.
By the time I got to the house, I couldn't remember the kid's name. It's Tim. And I couldn't remember his dad's name. It's Mike. But we were able to get Tim back on board, and the adults that knew how to do rescue breathing. And it looks a lot like it looks in the videos. I mean, they pushed air in and out come the water, and coughed and sputtered and cried, and but it was scary, and that was one of the things my dad made sure that we learned how to swim early, so that we didn't have that issue. But so I'm glad he's doing all right. I don't think he's quite as old as me yet. Maybe he's getting close, but that was a long time ago.
It's a great story. I just wanted to remind people too, I did put a couple of questions in the polling. So if anybody wants to answer those, we'd appreciate it. If you don't see it, the bottom 3 little dots, the ellipsis in the bottom right-hand corner, we'll open that up for you. You can go in there and answer a couple of those just for fun. Steve sent me a message, Lisa, about a program called Boat US. I think it's supposed to be .org. Are you familiar with that?
Yes. Boat US has a lot of really great resources, and there's education that they offer as well.
So I'm gonna put a link for that in the chat also too. So
we've worked with a lot of really great partner organizations that offer education and hands-on courses too.
And I know, Joe, maybe that'll help you out. Joe asked a question about, is there a course I can take that goes over all the buoys and what they mean?
So with the course that we offer on the DNR website, so it's mndnr.gov/boating safety, there is our boating safety course, and that actually there's questions on there that talk about buoys, what they mean, the navigation signs, and you know, it's important to remember that a lot of lakes may not have the different kind of buoys, but there's a lot of bodies of water in Minnesota that do have the buoys. And you definitely don't want to come up upon one not knowing what it means.
That was one, I grew up down in the Red Wing area and had a little dinghy boat. I still have, and my grandpa had a little bit bigger boat and had friends that had boats, and learning how all that, the buoys and the navigational markers and stuff, especially on a river like the Mississippi that is used for barges and navigating up and down, was super useful. And yeah, I should actually take a refresher course because it's hard to remember all that stuff a few years
And even
later.
if you know, in the boating guide that we have, there's pages on there that have all the buoys and what they mean in there too. So if you need just a quick flip through, if you're not, able to take a full class, flip through the boating guide because there's a lot of really great information in there too.
You were talking earlier about boats, being cautious of how close you get to shore and all that stuff. And I don't know if you saw this. A friend of mine just shared this on his, I think it was on Facebook or something this morning, but down in Trempealeau, a barge is coming upstream and got a little too close. I assuming, I couldn't really tell from the picture, but assuming that the barge got a little beached on a sandbar or something, and was trying to power off of it, and the wake that he was kicking up and just the amount of water that comes out of the back of those barges are super powerful. Obviously, they push all that upstream, but washed away the whole dock in front of I can't remember the name of the bar and restaurant there, Cat Catchers or something like that. But the whole dock, all of a sudden you saw the whole thing just floating downstream with about 4 or 5 boats attached to it. So use caution.
Whoops.
Yeah, I'm sure the tugboat operator and the company he works for was probably not very happy about that. But there was a lot of people there that boated down to have dinner or lunch or whatever at the restaurant, and this barge got a little too close and tried to power through it and ended up washing a bunch of boats downstream. So
Yikes.
it's amazing what that wake can do, the power of water.
Yeah, and those barges, I mean, that's if you're especially on the river, it's where there is barge traffic. I mean, as a boater or a paddler, to know they're not moving out of your way, so keep clear. And there's a force around those boats. So if you get too close, you're putting yourself in a really scary situation. So give them lots of space. They're not going to be able to turn those things very quickly. So yeah, give them all the space that they need.
They're kind of like a train. They can't stop on a dime either. So
yeah.
I did open the poll. Thank you for everybody that answered that. Only 16% of the people that answered that have taken a boating safety course. So congratulations to you on 16%. We appreciate you taking the course and increasing your knowledge about boating safety, but at least a lot of other people out there that could benefit from these courses too. So, and we had 44% of the respondents are planning on spending some time on the water this summer with a motorboat, and 19% are going to be out in the water in some kind of paddle sport. So, and we had or 44% of people that responded said they would be in favor of a required boater safety course at some sunset date, like we talked about with, if you're born after a certain date, you have to take a boater safety course. And I know we mentioned a little bit in the back room that may be a possibility in the future, and I would support that. Seems like a good idea, especially in a land of 11,842 lakes. So, no, Craig, did you see any other questions in there?
Nope, I don't see any questions really at all here, Benji.
Great.
25, 30 years ago, I worked boat and water patrol up here in Itasca County, and we did a few drowning recoveries. We did a lot of opening weekend patrol, holiday weekend patrol, and life jackets was probably the biggest one. Boaters indulging in too many beverages, overloading boats, different things like that. And so just be mindful of that stuff. If you got a smaller boat, don't be putting 6 or 8 people in there. Like a small fishing boat, 14-foot fishing boat. I remember one, they probably had maybe 2 or 3 inches of freeboard on the side because they had so much stuff in the boat plus the people. And we ended up taking some of the people out of the boat and giving them a ride to shore. And the driver operator of the boat actually got a ride into town because of too many beverages. But got to be careful out there, guys. It's all fun. It's all exciting, but one mistake and it's going to be a super bad memory for a long time. So that's all I got.
I did see one more question came in, and we talked about this earlier, and I completely forgot about it. So Lee, thank you for mentioning that. Power loading at launches. It's a huge issue. I know the DNR has been asking for some money to fix launches because people are power loading. I don't know if Lisa, you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, as far as preserving our launches, and I think we've all, if you've been on the water, you've probably seen it more, not the appropriate way to be, loading up your boat. Not only does it ruin the launch, it creates a really dangerous situation for a drop off right there. So, if it's an area where kids might be swimming, there's going to be a huge drop off there. Just for the preservation of all of us being able to use those launches. The power loading has been a big issue.
And what exactly is power loading?
Do you want to explain it? I might. I would just say it's going real fast up getting your boat on the.
I don't think it's illegal technically, but it's people that we talked about backing a boat, and there's a sweet spot when you back your boat into the water and how deep that trailer goes in, and you can get your boat on. So if you don't back it into that sweet spot, you get your boat partially up on the trailer rather than trying to winch it up the last 5 feet. They'll just gas the motor and push it up there. Well, all that turbulence in the bottom really digs a big hole in there. And sooner or later, you get somebody with a little bit longer trailer, or like Lisa was saying, kids that are walking down the ramp. They fall into that hole. The trailer can fall into that hole at the end of the ramp, and then you're in trouble. You can't get that boat back out. So, Lee asked if that was illegal. I'm not positive. I don't know about that. If that's actually illegal, it is dangerous and destructive, though. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
When I was talking about the episode today, one of our coworkers here in the building said, remind folks that there's a lot of different accesses out there. And Lisa touched on, soft access. And up here we have county accesses, we have state accesses, we have private access, and even a couple of city accesses. And Some of them have cement ramps, and others just have a soft bottom. So plan ahead. You know, if you're going out there to put your boat in a unknown access, you know, maybe wait out there a little bit and see what kind of bottom you got before you just push your truck and trailer out in the water like that red picture you had.
Great. See one more Mark put in there, just picked up a porta boat. So congratulations, Mark. Have fun out there. Be safe in the water today or this summer and always. So I don't know. I think that's all we got for questions on there.
We just popped one in about enforcement needs to begin enforcing straight pipe, and most of the COs I know carry a sound meter, and if the boat is producing too much noise, it is a chargeable offense. So
Yep, absolutely. That's one that I think there's a lot of focus on is noise ordinance, and making sure that they're in the right decibel level, and if the boat has cutouts, and so yeah, if there's, we always have our tip line available. COs seem to be everywhere all the time, but you can always send in a tip if there's a lake that you're out on it, that there's a concern for that.
well, we got just a couple minutes left, so I think we've answered all the questions. Let me just scroll down here one more time, Benji. Lee said a sound meter is not always necessary, and yep, you can hear them coming.
For a conviction,
guys,
it is, that's for sure. But yes, you're right. You can hear them right when they start the boat
there,
up.
have fun. Then you know, boating can be something you can do your entire life, and whether you fish or just joyride, it's all good stuff. So with that, I think Benji will go ahead and stop the recording and move us back into the practice room. Tune in next week for episode 116, Lake Trout, a success story.
Yeah, that'll be a good one. So everybody stay safe out there. Enjoy the water. It looks like a beautiful weekend. So hopefully we'll see you next week. Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you so much.